hold on there a minute. Didn't we already learn about connective tissue? Yes, we certainly have. But you see, connective tissue will be a part of every system in the body. So let us describe connective tissue in relationship to the muscles that you will be learning about. I would like to read an excerpt from one of my favorite anatomy and physiology books called Job's Body by Dean Ewan. This book is written by a body worker for body workers who work with connective tissues and muscles on a daily basis, and this lends a unique perspective to the understanding of these tissues. Bear with me as I read through a few paragraphs of the section entitled The Supportive Network. I think that it will help you gain a greater understanding of the breadth and depth of the expansiveness of the connective tissues of the body. Connective tissue then, in its various shapes and consistencies, forms a continuous net throughout the entire body. It contains many specialized structures, but it is really all one piece, from scalp to soles and from skin to marrow. If all the other tissues were extracted, the connective framework alone would preserve the three-dimensional human form in all of its details. Just beneath the skin, it forms an envelope that wraps the body as a whole. And beneath this outer layer, it organizes the muscles into functional groups, wraps each individual muscle, and also honeycombs the interior of the muscle belly with supporting septa. It gathers the ends of the muscles into tendons, and tendons blend into the fibrous sheath that covers the bones, the periosteum. The periosteum is continuous with ligaments, and even with the inner coating of the hollow bones, the endosteum. Connective tissue binds other specific tissues into their organ shapes and supports them with vessels and ducts, and it ties these organs together and suspends them in their proper relationships in the body cavities. It forms the walls of blood and lymph vessels, it surrounds these vessels, and it anchors them into place among the muscles, bones, and organs, and it anchors the nerves in the same fashion. In short, connective tissue constitutes the immediate environment of every cell in the body, wrapping and uniting all structures with its moist, fibrous, cohering sheets and strands. Because of its complexity and continuity, this network can well be regarded as a full-fledged organ, one of the largest and most extensive organs in the body, and few organs have such an impressive variety of functions. So keep this in mind as we study the muscles, and know that these muscles are interconnected by the connective tissues, from the scalp all the way down to the big toe. And when an area responds or is affected, it changes the entire body. There are three types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. In this chapter, we will concentrate on skeletal muscle, but we will look at all three in lab, so please understand the similarities and differences between these for the laboratory. Let us now look at the anatomy of skeletal muscle. But before we do, I'd like to introduce you to two terms that are used to mean muscle, and these are mysium or myo and sarco. We will see these terms used as prefixes or suffixes, and we will be exposed to them as we learn the names of structures. Skeletal muscle is a highly organized tissue with parallel arrangement of muscle fibers. The term muscle fiber refers to a muscle cell. These muscle cells are bound together with connective tissue, and this connective tissue bundles itself into tendons. The connective tissue that surrounds an entire muscle is called the epimysium. The epimysium is a tough, dense, irregular connective tissue that blends with the deep fascia that separates muscle bellies or the superficial fascia of the hypodermis. The muscle belly is compartmentalized into groups of muscle fibers called fascicles. Each fascicle is encased by the fibrous connective tissue of the perimysium. Each muscle fiber is surrounded by a loose connective tissue called the endomysium, and each of these connective tissue sheaths are interwoven with each other, forming a honeycomb-like fibrous skeleton. Muscles attach to bones either directly or indirectly. A direct attachment is seen here with the infraspinatus muscle attaching to the scapula. The epimysium of the muscle blends right in with the periosteum of the bone. The distal attachment, however, is showing an indirect attachment where the muscle is attached by a tendon. This picture shows another type of indirect attachment called an aponeurosis, which is a flat connective tissue sheath. Before moving on to the microscopic anatomy of skeletal muscle, I would like you to pause this video and read in your textbook about the special characteristics of muscle tissue and muscle functions. And I'll see you when you get back. We will now be looking at an individual muscle cell. The endomysium has been removed to expose the cell membrane called the sarcolemma. We can see multiple nuclei, and muscle cells tend to be abundant in mitochondria. In another biology course, you may have heard skeletal muscle as referred to as being striated. The appearance of striations on histological examination is due to the structure of the myofibrils that contain the functional units of skeletal muscle. Let us look more closely at a myofibril to begin the discussion of how this functional unit enables a muscle to do its job. You will find the architecture of muscle with its parallel arrangements of fibers repeated as we look at the smaller structures that make up the myofibril. Here we see an extremely well-organized system of cable wires laid down in parallel to one another and in series. The highly complex arrangements of these wires, which we will refer to as myofilaments, is what gives skeletal muscle the banding or striated appearance that it is so famous for. Let's explore these myofilaments and learn a little something about them first before we put it all together to study the workings of these units. The myofilaments are the contractile element of the functional unit of skeletal muscle. There are two types, a thick filament and a thin filament. The thick filament is composed of a bundle of myosin molecules. Myosin is a type of protein, and each myosin molecule has two globular heads attached by a flexible hinge to a rod-like tail. The thin filament is made up of two actin subunits that look like a string of pearls, a long tropomyosin molecule, and a globular troponin. There are a number of very important binding sites along both the myosin and actin that we will look at when we study muscle contraction. The arrangement of myosin and actin filaments to each other is depicted in this drawing. We see one myosin filament flanked by four actin filaments. In this two-dimensional view, that is the appearance that is given. However, in 3 dimensions, the architecture is a bit more complex. Let's see how this is all put together within the myofibril. The actin filaments are anchored at a protein structure called the Z-discs, and the myosin filaments sit in between the actin filaments and are held in place by the large elastic filament called titin. From Z-disc to Z-disc, we have the functional unit of skeletal muscle called the sarcomere. A couple more structures will round out our discussion of the microscopic anatomy. In skeletal muscle cells, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is specialized into an elaborate interconnecting tubular system. This tubular system is called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and in specific areas of the sarcomere, it is further specialized into expanded channels that run longitudinally and are associated with another tubule called the T-tubule. These are the terminal cisternae of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and 2 terminal cisternae and 1 T-tubule forms a triad. The T-tubules are in-pocketings or invaginations of the sarcolemma and run along the terminal cisternae. The T-tubule is open to the extracellular environment. We have now set the stage for our discussion of the sliding filament model of muscle contraction. All we need to do is throw in some acetylcholine, calcium ions, and ATP, and we have a good recipe for some muscle contraction. But you will have to wait for that. We will discuss it in class, so please read that section to prepare you for our in-class discussion and activity. Okay, that's it for this video. See you soon.